He arrived at the restaurant in stained clothes, calloused hands, and offered to cook the main course. The chefs laughed at him, but when they saw him serve the first dish, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was a frantic Monday morning when Daniel Costa, 42, entered the kitchen of the 3-Michelin-star restaurant in San Francisco, his face marked by deep wrinkles and stubble-hid features that had once been photographed for international gastronomic magazines. He gripped his cart with hands that trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from the weight of buried memories. Daniel had worked as a dishwasher for 3 years, invisible to the chefs who shouted orders in French, transparent to the sous chefs who tasted complex sauces, non-existent to the critics who came seeking innovation. He cleaned the same pans that dozens of talented chefs used, his hands touching culinary instruments he once commanded like a maestro. The kitchen was particularly tense that morning. The Étoile d'Or restaurant was about to lose its 3rd Michelin star. The final evaluation would be in 5 days, and none of the chefs had managed to create a menu that impressed the preliminary critics. It was the kind of crisis that ended careers and closed restaurants. At the center of the kitchen, surrounded by expensive ingredients and imported copper pans, Chef Antoine Rousseau gestured dramatically while tasting yet another failed dish. "This is garbage," shouted Antoine, throwing his fork on the counter. He was 45, hair perfectly slicked back, and an ego the size of his reputation. 5 days. 5 days to create a menu worthy of 3 stars, and all you bring me is common bistro food. "Chef, we tried the Asian-French fusion you suggested," said Sarah Miller, the 32-year-old sous chef, nervously adjusting her apron. "But the critics said it lacks originality." "Originality?" Antoine laughed bitterly. "You wouldn't recognize originality if it danced naked in front of you." Marcus Kim, the 38-year-old line cook, rolled his eyes while chopping vegetables. "Maybe if we had a real executive chef instead of a temperamental Frenchman." "What did you say?" Antoine turned sharply. "Nothing, chef." Marcus went back to chopping, smiling maliciously. Daniel continued washing dishes silently at the industrial sink, his movements methodical and precise. He heard every word but kept his head down, as he always did. Invisible. Safe. Victoria Stone, the restaurant owner, entered the kitchen like a hurricane in high heels. At 50, she had built a gastronomic empire and had no patience for failure. "Antoine, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp as a chef's knife. "The investors are nervous. If we lose the 3rd star, we'll lose half our clients, and half the value of this place." "Victoria, I know." Antoine ran his hand through his hair. "But I need time, inspiration. You have 5 days, not 5 months." She looked around the kitchen with contempt. "And frankly, I'm starting to question whether I hired the right chef." Sarah whispered to Marcus, "This is going to be a disaster. I've seen restaurants lose stars. It's like watching a ship sink in slow motion." "Hey you." Antoine's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Dishwasher, how many times do I need to tell you to make less noise? You're disrupting my concentration." Daniel looked up briefly. "Sorry, chef." "Sorry doesn't cook food." Antoine shot back. "How long have you been here?" 3 years? And you still haven't learned to be silent." Marcus let out a cruel laugh. "Leave the guy alone, Antoine. He probably never saw real food before working here. To him, our common bistro food must seem like haute cuisine." Sarah joined in the laughter. "True. I bet he thinks instant ramen is sophisticated." Daniel squeezed the sponge he was holding, water and detergent dripping between his fingers. He took a deep breath, counting to 10. "Don't respond. Don't react. You deserve this. You lost the right to defend yourself." "Actually," said Victoria, looking at Daniel with indifference, "we should be grateful. Cheap labor is hard to find, especially when you can pay minimum wage to ex-convicts who have no choice." The kitchen fell silent for a moment. Everyone knew Daniel had a criminal past, but no one mentioned it directly. Until now. "Seriously," said Sarah, her eyes widening. "He's an ex-convict? Why? What did he do?" "I don't know and don't care," said Victoria, turning to leave. "As long as he washes the dishes and doesn't steal anything." Marcus approached Daniel, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. Dude, is it true? You were in prison. For how long? Daniel continued washing dishes, not responding. Hey, I'm talking to you. Marcus poked his shoulder. Or do ex-convicts not talk to normal people? Leave him alone, said Antoine, returning his focus to the dishes in front of him. We don't have time for this. We have an impossible menu to create. It was at that moment that the smoke alarm went off. Black smoke began pouring from one of the pans on the main stove. Sarah had left a red wine sauce reducing and gotten distracted by the conversation. Shit, she yelled, running to the pan. The demi-glace. It's burning. Antoine ran over, looking horrified at the pan. No. That took 6 hours to make, and we need it for the main course. The sauce was darkening rapidly, the smell of burning filling the kitchen. Sarah tried to save it, stirring frantically, but only made it worse. It's ruined, said Marcus, grimacing. We're going to have to start from scratch. Another 6 hours. We don't have 6 hours. Antoine exploded. We need to test this dish today. The preliminary critics come tomorrow. Victoria came running back. What's happening here? Why is there smoke? Daniel dropped the sponge. Something inside him broke, a barrier he had built with 8 years of silence and self-punishment. His hands stopped trembling. His eyes, previously lowered and ashamed, became sharp and focused. He approached the stove. Get out of the way, he said, his voice firm and commanding for the first time in years. Sarah looked at him, confused. What? You can't. But Daniel was already there, grabbing the pan with a cloth. He smelled the sauce, his eyes closing for a moment as he identified each component: red wine, veal stock, thyme, roasted garlic, port reduction. It can still be saved, he said, his hands already moving with purpose. Sarah, bring me half a cup of cold red wine. Marcus, I need 2 tablespoons of cold butter cut into cubes. And someone get me dark chocolate, 70% cocoa, no more. Everyone froze, staring at the dishwasher who was suddenly giving orders, as if he were the executive chef. Are you deaf? Daniel's voice cut like a blade. Now, the pure authority in his voice made everyone move automatically. Sarah brought the wine. Marcus cut the butter. Antoine, still in shock, handed over a bar of Valrhona chocolate. Daniel worked fast. He added the cold wine in small portions, stirring in precise circular movements. Then he mounted the butter off the heat, emulsifying the sauce. He grated the chocolate directly into the pan, an old French technique to balance burnt flavors. What the hell are you doing? Asked Antoine, but there was curiosity in his voice now, not anger. Escoffier's rescue technique, modified, said Daniel, without stopping his work. The chocolate and butter will mask the bitterness of the burnt, while the wine adds fresh acidity. It's a technique Auguste Escoffier used when saving sauces in the Ritz kitchen in Paris. How do you know about Escoffier? Asked Sarah, mouth agape. Daniel didn't answer, concentrated on his work. He tasted the sauce, adjusted with a touch of sea salt and a pinch of sugar. Then, surprisingly, added 3 drops of aged balsamic vinegar. Perfect, he said, straining the sauce through a chinois with movements that were pure muscle memory. He dipped a clean spoon and offered it to Antoine. Taste. Antoine hesitated, his pride fighting against his curiosity. Finally, he tasted. His eyes widened. He tasted again, then a third time, analyzing each flavor note. This is extraordinary, he whispered. Better than the original. There's depth, complexity. How did you do this? Daniel put the pan back on the stove on low heat. Basic chemistry and experience. The burnt adds smoky notes if you know how to balance it. The chocolate brings umami. The balsamic vinegar cuts the fat and enhances the wine. Victoria approached, grabbing a spoon. She tasted, and her expression went from skepticism to absolute shock. Who the hell are you? She asked, looking at Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. Before Daniel could respond, the kitchen door opened. An elderly man with gray hair entered, wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a notebook. It was Thomas Bennett, 68, former food critic and current restaurant consultant. Thomas stopped in the middle of the kitchen, his nose in the air. What is that aroma? He walked to the stove, looked at the sauce, then at Daniel, and then his eyes widened in recognition. Daniel Costa, Thomas whispered, his voice trembling. My God, Daniel Costa. Antoine looked between the two men. You know our dishwasher? Thomas let out an incredulous laugh. No, Antoine, this dishwasher's, or was Daniel Costa. The Daniel Costa. Who? Asked Sarah. Thomas turned to her, incredulous. You don't know who Daniel Costa is? He owned 2 3-Michelin-star restaurants here in San Francisco, Sava and Latelier. He won the James Beard Award for Best Chef West at 32. He was considered the culinary prodigy of the decade. Marcus let out a nervous laugh. That's crazy. If he was so amazing, what's he doing washing dishes? The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel wiped his hands on his apron, not looking at anyone. Because 8 years ago, my 2 restaurants burned in a fire. My sous chef died. His name was Lucas Costa. He was my younger brother. Sarah put her hand over her mouth. I was accused of causing the fire through negligence, Daniel continued, his voice monotone, as if telling someone else's story. They said I left the stove on, that I was drunk. I wasn't. But the evidence, or what seemed to be evidence, was against me. I was convicted. I spent 4 years in prison. Antoine was pale. Daniel, I didn't know. Nobody knows, said Daniel, finally looking at them. Because that's exactly how I wanted it. I came here, to this restaurant, and asked for the lowest job available. Because after killing my brother, even if accidentally, even if I don't remember doing it, I don't deserve to be in a kitchen doing what I love. I deserve to wash the dishes that other chefs use to create art. But you were acquitted, said Thomas gently. I read about the case. 2 years after your imprisonment, they discovered it was arson. A former employee confessed. You were exonerated. Exonerated by law, said Daniel bitterly. But Lucas is still dead. My wife still left me, taking my daughter Emma, who was 6 at the time. She's 14 now, and hasn't seen me in 8 years. Being exonerated doesn't bring back the dead or repair destroyed families. Victoria stepped forward, her expression completely changed. Daniel, Mr. Costa, I had no idea. If I had known. Known what? Daniel stared at her. Would you have treated me with respect? Paid me more than minimum wage? Victoria, you just called me cheap labor. Made jokes about me being an ex-convict. The only difference now is that you know my name. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but had no words. Her face was red with shame. Thomas approached Daniel, his eyes shining with emotion. Daniel, I ate at your restaurants dozens of times. Your cuisine was poetry. Remember that scallop dish with Sicilian lemon foam and yuzu caviar? I still dream about it. It was the most memorable meal of my life. Thomas, please. Daniel shook his head. That man died in the fire along with Lucas. No. Thomas grabbed Daniel's arm. I just saw you save an impossible sauce, with technique 90% of chefs don't know. I saw you transform disaster into triumph in less than 5 minutes. That man didn't die. He's just hiding. Antoine was mentally replaying the last 3 years. You've been here all this time. Watching. Listening to our failures. Seeing our mistakes. Why? Why didn't you say anything? Because it wasn't my place, said Daniel. I was paying my penance. Even exonerated. I need to live with the fact that my brother died in my kitchen. That my daughter grew up without a father. That my wife, Melissa, had to rebuild her life alone because I was in prison. Marcus, who had been so cruel minutes ago, was now visibly shaken. Man, I made jokes about you being an ex-convict. I didn't know. You didn't need to know to be kind, said Daniel simply. But that's how the world works. We judge before we know. We condemn before we understand. Sarah wiped away tears that began to fall. The sauce you just saved, it was incredible. Better than anything we've done in weeks. Daniel, could you help us with the menu? No, said Daniel, returning to the dish sink. It's not my place. Nonsense, said Thomas, his voice becoming firmer. Victoria, You have a legendary chef washing your dishes for 3 years. A man who could easily have his own restaurant line again. And you're 5 days away from losing your 3rd star because no one here has the necessary creativity. Victoria looked between Thomas and Daniel. Mr. Costa. Daniel, what is Thomas suggesting? I'm suggesting, said Thomas, that you give Daniel a chance. Let him create a dish for the preliminary critics tomorrow. 1 dish. If he impresses them, we consider letting him work on the menu for the final evaluation. This is crazy, said Antoine, but his voice lacked conviction. He hasn't cooked professionally in 8 years. He just saved your sauce better than you could. Thomas shot back, and we all know it. Antoine fell silent, his pride fighting against reality. Finally, he sighed. Daniel, I apologize. For the treatment. For the cruel words. I didn't know. And if you had known, asked Daniel, would you be different? Or just more careful with your words? Antoine considered honestly. I don't know, but I want to believe so. And I'd love to see you cook, if you'll accept. Daniel looked at his hands that had created award-winning dishes, hands that had held his dying brother, hands that had washed dishes for 3 years in silent penance. I don't know if I still can, he admitted. It's been so long. And every time I think about creating something, I see Lucas. I see the flames. I see everything I lost. Lucas was your sous chef? Asked Sarah gently. He was. Daniel closed his eyes. More than that, he was my best friend. We grew up in our grandfather's kitchen in Lisbon. We learned to cook together. When I opened my first restaurant, he was by my side. When we won our first Michelin star, we cried. Together. And when the flames took over Sava that night, he went back, entered the burning building to try to save something. I was outside, trying to help customers evacuate, when I realized he hadn't come out. His voice broke. They found his body near the kitchen. The firefighters said he died from smoke inhalation before the burns. At least he didn't suffer. At least it was quick. Tears were flowing freely down Daniel's face now. Years of repressed pain finally finding an outlet. And you were arrested for it, said Marcus, his voice full of horror. For a fire you didn't cause. The prosecutor said I was drunk, that I left the stove on. They presented an empty whiskey bottle found in the kitchen. Witnesses said they saw me drinking that night. And I couldn't defend myself because I didn't remember clearly. I was in shock, traumatized. My lawyer said my silence looked like guilt. Thomas placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. But the truth came out. The former employee confessed. Said you fired him for stealing. So he decided to get revenge. He started the fire deliberately. The truth came out too late, said Daniel. 4 years too late. Lucas was still dead. Melissa had divorced me. Emma grew up visiting her father in prison until Melissa stopped bringing her because it was too traumatic. When I got out, free but destroyed, I had nothing. No restaurants. No reputation. No family. Did you try to see your daughter? Asked Sarah. I tried. Daniel wiped his face. Melissa made it clear I wasn't welcome. Said Emma had moved on, that she was happy now, that my presence would only reopen wounds. So I respected her wishes. I send letters on Emma's birthday every year. Never get a response. Don't even know if she reads them. Victoria was crying openly now. Daniel, I'm so sorry. So much. If I had known. But you didn't, said Daniel. And that's exactly the point. How many people do you judge every day without knowing their stories? How many ex-convicts or cheap labor have tragedies you'll never know? The question hung in the air like smoke. Antoine approached, extending his hand. Daniel Costa, it would be an honor if you cooked with us. Not as a dishwasher, as a chef. Daniel looked at the extended hand, then at the faces around him. Sarah with tears in her eyes, Marcus visibly ashamed of his cruel words, Victoria struggling with guilt, and Thomas smiling encouragingly. I don't know, Daniel whispered. Every time I get near a stove, I see the flames. I see Lucas. Then cook for him, said Thomas gently. Honor his memory by creating what you both loved, art through food. Don't let that fire kill you too. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 8 years of guilt and pain, but also feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, a small flicker of purpose. "One dish," he said finally. "I'll create one dish for the preliminary critics tomorrow. But if I fail, if it's not good enough, I go back to the sink, and we never mention this again." "Fair," said Antoine, finally shaking Daniel's hand. "But I have a feeling you won't fail." That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He was in his small apartment, looking at old photos. Him and Lucas in their grandfather's kitchen, the opening of Sava, Emma as a baby covered in flour, while helping Daddy make bread. He picked up a specific photo. Lucas holding the James Beard Award, smiling widely. On the back, in his handwriting, it said, "To Daniel, the best chef and best brother. We're going to conquer the world together." "I failed you, bro," Daniel whispered to the photo. "But I'm going to try to honor your memory. One more time." The next morning, Daniel arrived at the restaurant before everyone. He didn't wear his dishwasher uniform. Instead, he wore simple black pants and a white shirt, the closest thing he had to a chef's uniform. He stood in front of the stoves, his hands trembling. For 8 years, he had avoided being in this position. For 8 years, fire represented only trauma. "Breathe," said a voice behind him. It was Thomas, arriving early. "It's just fire. It's just food. It's what you were born to do." "What if I freeze? What if the memories?" "Then you freeze," said Thomas. "And we help you come back. But you need to try, Daniel. At least try." Daniel nodded, lighting the stove. The blue flame appeared, and for a moment he was back to that night. Orange flames consuming everything, screams, sirens. But then he thought of Lucas, of his smile, of the passion they shared for cooking. "For you, bro," he whispered, and began to work. When the rest of the team arrived an hour later, Daniel already had ingredients organized. Fresh scallops from the fish market, black truffles, wild asparagus, and components no one expected. Antoine observed the mise en place with an expert's eye. "What are you making exactly?" "Memories of Lisbon," said Daniel, his hands now steady as he worked. "It's a dish my grandfather made, that Lucas and I modernized. Scallops with Portuguese toasted bread crust, cod foam, smoked paprika oil, and black olive soil." Sarah approached, fascinated. "Olive soil. How does that work?" "Dehydrated and pulverized with maltodextrin," Daniel explained, already in his element. "Creates soil texture, but melts on the tongue, releasing intense olive flavor. It's a molecular technique applied to traditional ingredients." Marcus was setting up a station, but couldn't take his eyes off Daniel. "You're using modernist techniques with traditional Portuguese food?" "It's what I always did," said Daniel. "Honor roots while pushing boundaries. My grandfather said, 'Cooks copy, chefs create.' Lucas and I took that seriously." As Daniel worked, something magical happened. His team, who hours ago ridiculed him, now watched him with reverence. Every movement was precise. Every technique was perfect. "Scallop temperature is crucial," Daniel explained while working, naturally falling into the mentor role. "You want 50 degrees Celsius in the center. More than that gets rubbery. Less is too raw." He demonstrated the perfect sear, 90 seconds on each side in golden butter, constantly basting. "The sound tells you everything," he said. "Hear that? That constant but not aggressive sizzle. Perfect. If it goes silent, increase the heat. If it crackles violently, reduce." Sarah grabbed a notebook, frantically taking notes. For the first time in her career, she was watching a true masterwork up close. Antoine tasted the cod foam Daniel was finishing. "My God, how do you get such intense flavor, but such light texture?" "Homemade fish gelatin combined with soy lecithin," Daniel explained. "And the secret is not to beat too much. You want large, ethereal bubbles. It's not meringue." 2 hours later, the dish was ready. Daniel plated 5 identical dishes with surgical precision, each scallop positioned at exactly the same angle, each dot of foam placed with tweezers, the olive soil artistically dusted. It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. Thomas had invited 3 preliminary critics, without telling anyone. When they entered the kitchen, they were surprised to see Daniel Costa, a legend everyone thought had disappeared, standing before the stoves. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Thomas, "allow me to reintroduce Chef Daniel Costa." The critics tasted in silence. Each forkful was analyzed, dissected, considered. Finally, one of the critics, Margaret, known for being relentless, spoke. "This is the best dish I've tasted in 5 years. The technique is impeccable. The flavor is transcendent. It's traditional and innovative simultaneously." Another critic agreed. "If this is the level of creativity for the final evaluation, you'll not only keep the 3rd star, you deserve consideration for a 4th, if it existed." Antoine was speechless. Victoria had tears of relief in her eyes. Sarah and Marcus applauded spontaneously. But Daniel only closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "We did it, Lucas. We did it." In the following days, Daniel worked with the team creating a complete 7-course menu. He didn't take over as executive chef. He insisted on working alongside Antoine as co-chef. "Your restaurant, your rules," said Daniel. "I'm here to help, not to take over." But it was obvious to everyone who really led. Daniel had a vision, a passion that was contagious. He transformed the kitchen from a place of stress and ego into a laboratory of creativity and collaboration. Sarah became his unofficial protege. "How do you know which flavors combine?" she asked one day. "Experience, but also intuition," Daniel replied. "Think of flavors as relationships. Some are obvious, tomato and basil, always friends. Others are surprising, chocolate and bacon, unlikely but incredible. And some are complex. They require a mediator, like salt or acid to bridge them." Marcus, who had been so cruel, now constantly sought advice. "Chef Costa, can I ask about that emulsification technique you used?" "Call me Daniel," he said. "And of course, come, I'll show you." Even Victoria changed completely. She offered Daniel a contract as executive chef with substantial salary. "No," said Daniel gently. "Not yet. First, let's get through the evaluation. First, let's prove I deserve to be here. Not for my old reputation, but for current work." The night of the final evaluation arrived. 3 anonymous Michelin Guide inspectors were among the customers. No one knew who they were, but everyone knew they were there. Daniel and Antoine led the kitchen like a well-oiled machine. Each dish came out perfect. Each timing was precise. The menu was a journey. It began with Daniel's scallop dish, passed through modern interpretations of French and Portuguese classics, and culminated in a dessert that made customers cry. Childhood memory, which combined Portuguese rice pudding with French patisserie techniques. When the last dish was served, the kitchen exploded in applause. They had done something special. Everyone felt it. Thomas entered, smiling widely. "Congratulations." I just heard comments from several customers. Words like transcendent, innovative, and unforgettable were used. 3 weeks later, the official news arrived. Not only did they keep the 3 stars, the Michelin Guide specifically mentioned the restaurant in its annual report as Culinary Renaissance, led by the triumphant return of legendary chef Daniel Costa. The news spread quickly. Gastronomic newspapers from around the world wanted interviews. Magazines wanted photos. But Daniel refused almost all. "It's not about me," he told Thomas. "It's about the team. About second chances. About honoring those we lost." But there was one interview he couldn't refuse. Food and Wine magazine was doing a special feature on chefs who overcame adversity. They wanted Daniel on the cover. During the interview, the journalist asked, "Chef Costa, you spent 4 years unjustly imprisoned. Lost everything. How didn't you become bitter?" Daniel thought carefully. Bitterness is easy. Revenge is easy. But rebuilding? Choosing to grow instead of rot? That takes courage. And every time I wanted to give up, I thought of Lucas. He would never give up on me. So I can't give up on his memory. Do you have plans to open your own restaurant again? Yes, said Daniel. But not like before. I want to create something different. Something that truly honors Lucas. 6 months after the evaluation, Daniel made an announcement. He was leaving Étoile d'Or, but not to compete. I'm going to open 2 projects, he explained in a meeting with the entire team. First, a culinary training program for ex-convicts. I'll teach skills, give certifications, connect with restaurants willing to give second chances. Victoria was the first to speak. Count on Etoile d'Or. We'll hire program graduates. It's the least I can do after how I treated you. Second, Daniel continued, I'm going to open a community restaurant. Half the tables will be reserved for homeless people or those in financial difficulty. Complete, dignified 3-course meals. No cost. Antoine frowned. How will it sustain itself financially? The other half of the tables will be for paying customers, Daniel explained. But I'll charge fairly, not exorbitant prices. The idea is to create community. Rich and poor eating side by side, sharing the same quality food. Sarah raised her hand timidly. Daniel, can I join you? I want to be part of this. Me too, said Marcus. You taught me that cooking isn't about ego. It's about nourishing, about caring. I want to learn more. In the following months, Daniel worked tirelessly. He found a space in the Tenderloin, a difficult San Francisco neighborhood where many homeless people lived. It was intentional. I take food to where it's needed, he explained. I don't wait for hungry people to cross the city. The restaurant was called Lucas's Table, in honor of his brother. The decor was simple but welcoming. No pretension, no exclusivity, just open tables and honest food. On opening night, half the customers were homeless people referred by shelters and community organizations. The other half were professionals, curious about Chef Costa's new project. Daniel insisted on personally serving some tables. He knelt beside an elderly man named Raymond, who clearly hadn't been in a restaurant in years. Welcome to Lucas's Table, said Daniel. Tonight, you're going to eat like a king, because you deserve it. Raymond had tears in his eyes. Why? Why do this for people like me? Because someone did it for me, Daniel replied simply. When I was at rock bottom, someone gave me a chance. Now it's my turn to do the same. The food that came out of the kitchen that night wasn't food for the poor. It was the same level of quality Daniel made at Etoile d'Or. There was dignity in every dish. Thomas was there, watching everything with pride. Daniel, this is revolutionary. You're not just feeding people. You're restoring dignity. It's what Lucas would do, said Daniel. He always said, good food shouldn't be privilege. It should be right. I'm just living that philosophy. The training program for ex-convicts began 3 months later. Daniel secured funding through donations and partnerships with nonprofits. The first group had 8 students. All had been through the prison system. All carried stigma, just as Daniel had carried. On the first day, Daniel gathered everyone. I know what you face. I know what it's like to be judged for your worst moment. But here, your past don't matter. What matters is what you do now. What matters is the passion you put into this knife, this pan, this dish. One of the students, a 24-year-old named Carlos, raised his hand. Chef Costa, why do this? Why care about ex-convicts? Daniel raised his hands, showing burn scars. Because I am one. I was convicted for something I didn't do. Lost 4 years of my life. And when I got out, the world had already discarded me. But people gave me chances, and they transformed my life. He looked at each student. Now it's my turn to give. Chances to you. But I need commitment. Training is hard. Professional cooking is brutal. You'll cry. You'll burn yourselves. You'll want to quit. But if you stay, if you fight, I promise I'll have jobs waiting for each of you. Carlos wiped away a tear. Nobody ever believed in me like this. Welcome to the beginning of something new, said Daniel. In the following months, Daniel trained during the day and cooked at Lucas's Table at night. It was exhausting, but for the first time in 8 years, he had real purpose. Sarah and Marcus worked with him at the community restaurant, both renouncing higher salaries at elite establishments to be part of something meaningful. My parents think I'm crazy, Sarah admitted one night, leaving a 3-star restaurant to cook for homeless people. And what do you think? Asked Daniel. I think for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters. It's not about stars or critics. It's about seeing Raymond come back every week, smiling. It's about seeing Maria, who lives in a shelter, bring her daughter and say, look, honey, Today we're going to eat real food. Sarah wiped away tears. That's worth more than any Michelin star. 1 year after Lucas's table opened, something unexpected happened. Daniel was in the kitchen when Victoria appeared with a young woman of about 14. "Daniel," said Victoria nervously, "there's someone here to see you." Daniel turned, and his heart stopped. It was Emma, his daughter, now 14, tall, with his eyes and Melissa's smile. "Emma," he whispered, barely able to believe it. The girl took a hesitant step. "Hi, Dad." Daniel couldn't move. 8 years. 8 years since he'd seen her. "How did you? Why?" "I read about you," said Emma, her voice trembling. "In the magazine. About everything that happened. About Uncle Lucas. About the prison. About everything." She pulled an envelope from her pocket. "And Mom finally gave me these. All the letters you sent on my birthdays. She had kept them. Said she waited until I was old enough to understand." Emma began to cry. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not knowing the truth. For not being there. Mom told me you were dangerous. That you had done bad things. But reading your letters, seeing what you've built here, you're not dangerous. You're amazing." Daniel fell to his knees, sobbing. 8 years of pain, guilt, and separation crumbling. Emma ran to him, and father and daughter embraced for the first time in almost a decade. "I lost so much time," Daniel sobbed, holding Emma as if she might disappear at any moment. "I missed your childhood, your first days of school, your birthdays, everything." "But you never forgot me," said Emma, wiping her own tears. "Every letter talked about memories from when I was little, about how you taught me to make bread, about how I covered the kitchen in flour, and you laughed instead of getting mad. Dad, those memories kept me connected to you, even without knowing." Daniel touched her face gently, as if needing to confirm she was real. "You've grown so much. You're so beautiful. You look like your mother." "Mama's outside," said Emma. She wants to talk to you. If you want." Daniel's heart raced. Melissa, his ex-wife, the woman he loved and lost amid chaos. "She's here." Emma nodded, and Melissa entered timidly. At 40, she was still the woman Daniel had fallen in love with 20 years ago, but there were worry lines on her face that weren't there before. "Daniel," she said softly, can we talk?" They went out to the small patio behind the restaurant. Emma stayed inside with Sarah, who immediately adopted her, showing her the kitchen and telling stories about her father. "Melissa," Daniel began. "No." She raised her hand. "Let me speak first. Please." She took a deep breath, tears already forming. "I failed you. When you were arrested, when everything fell apart, I panicked. I had a small daughter, no money, and a husband accused of killing his own brother. So I believed what they told me. I believed you were guilty. Melissa, and even after the truth came out," she continued, her voice breaking, "even after they proved your innocence, I didn't come back, because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having doubted you. Ashamed of having taken Emma from you. Ashamed of having rebuilt my life while you suffered." Daniel was crying now too. "You were protecting our daughter. I understand. But I hid your letters," said Melissa. "All of them. Emma asked about you, and I said you didn't care, that you had moved on. I lied, Daniel, to our daughter, about you." She fell to her knees. "Forgive me. Please forgive me. I destroyed our family out of cowardice and fear." Daniel knelt beside her, taking her hands. "I already forgave you. A long time ago. You did what you thought was best. I won't blame you for trying to protect Emma. But she needed you," Melissa sobbed. "And I robbed that from her. Robbed 8 years. Then let's make the most of the next 80, said Daniel firmly. "If you'll let me. If Emma wants. I can't change the past, Melissa, but I can be present now." Melissa looked at him through tears. "I read about what you're doing. The community restaurant. The program for ex-convicts. Daniel, you transformed your tragedy into something beautiful." "I learned that holding grudges doesn't bring anyone back," he said. "Lucas is dead. There's nothing I can do about that, but I can honor him by helping others, giving the chances he didn't have." "I want Emma to spend time with you," said Melissa. If you want. Weekends, holidays, whenever you can. She needs to know the father I hid from her. I'd love that, said Daniel, more tears falling. More than anything. Melissa hugged him, and for a moment they were the couple they once were, young, in love, full of dreams. But now they were something different. Older, wiser, scarred but healed. In the following months, Emma became a constant presence at Lucas's table. She helped on weekends, learning to cook with her father, just as he had learned with his grandfather. "Dad, why do you call it Lucas's table?" she asked one day while they peeled potatoes together. Daniel smiled sadly. "Because your Uncle Lucas always said the best thing about food isn't the taste. It's sharing the table, meeting people, building community." "Tell me more about him," Emma asked. Mom never talked much. So Daniel told her about growing up in Lisbon with Lucas, about learning to make cod with their grandfather, about dreaming together of opening restaurants, about the first Michelin stars and how they celebrated with cheap wine because it was all they could afford. "He sounds amazing," said Emma. "I wish I had known him." "He would have loved you," said Daniel. "Always asked about you. Always brought presents. He was going to be the craziest, most fun uncle in the world." Emma wiped away a tear. "I'm sorry he died, and I'm sorry you were blamed." "Me too," said Daniel. "But you know what your uncle always told me." "Daniel, life isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to dance in the rain." So that's what I'm doing. Dancing in the rain. 2 years after Lucas's table opened, the training program had graduated 47 ex-convicts. 43 were employed in restaurants throughout San Francisco, for had opened their own small food businesses. Carlos, the first student who had asked why Daniel cared, was now the line cook at Lucas's table. He was also a mentor to new students. "Chef Costa changed my life," Carlos said in a local interview. "I was 24 and thought my life was over. I was stuck in the past. But he showed me we can be defined by our choices now, not our mistakes from the past." The story of the restaurant and program spread. Other chefs started similar programs in their cities. The community restaurant model was copied in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Daniel received offers to expand, to franchise, to transform Lucas's table into an empire. He refused all of them. "It's not about growing," he explained to a frustrated investor. "It's about depth, about doing one thing exceptionally well, about serving this community, not all communities." Thomas, now 70, visited regularly. "Daniel, do you realize what you've created? It's not just a restaurant. It's a movement." "It's what Lucas would have done," said Daniel. "He never wanted fame or fortune. He wanted to make a difference. So that's what I do." 3 years after Lucas's table opened, Daniel received an unexpected letter. It was from the Michelin Guide. "Dear Chef Costa, it is with pleasure that we inform you that Lucas's table is under consideration for special recognition. Although we do not award stars to establishments with mixed pricing models, we want to honor your work with our newly created Michelin Community Award." Daniel read the entire letter, then put it away. It wasn't about awards anymore. It never would be again. But that night, when Raymond, the elderly man who was one of the first customers, showed up for his weekly meal, Daniel sat with him. "Raymond, can I ask you something?" "Of course, chef. Why do you come back every week? Is the food that good?" Raymond laughed, his eyes shining. "The food is incredible, but I come back because of what you said on the first night. You deserve to eat like a king." "Nobody ever told me I deserved anything. You gave me dignity along with food. And that, Chef Costa, that's priceless." Daniel had to wipe away tears. This was why he did everything. Emma, now 16, had fallen in love with cooking. She talked about going to culinary school, following in her father's footsteps. "Are you sure?" asked Daniel. "It's a hard life. Long hours. Lots of stress. But it's also art," said Emma. "It's connection. It's what you taught me, Dad. Food isn't just nutrition. It's love." Daniel hugged her, pride overflowing. "Your Uncle Lucas would be so proud of you." "I know," Emma smiled. "Because every time I cook, I feel like he's here. Like he's guiding my hands." 5 years after that fateful day when Daniel saved the burnt sauce, he was back at Etoile d'Or, but not as an employee, as guest of honor. Antoine was retiring, and he had insisted Daniel come for the celebration. "My friend," said Antoine, hugging Daniel, "you transformed not just this restaurant, but me. Before you, I cooked for ego. Now I cook for purpose." The entire kitchen was there. Sarah, now executive chef of Etoile d'Or, Marcus, who had opened his own restaurant focused on affordable food, Victoria, who had transformed her empire into partnership with community organizations. "Daniel," said Victoria, raising a glass, "5 years ago, I called you cheap labor. It was the worst mistake of my life. Because you weren't cheap. You were precious. And you taught me that value doesn't come from titles, but from character." Daniel raised his own glass, looking at each face in the room. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, purpose. When I walked into that kitchen 5 years ago, I was dead inside, just a ghost washing dishes. But you saw me. You gave me a chance to be who I was again." He paused, emotional. "No, you gave me a chance to be something better, because the Daniel from before was talented, but selfish. He cooked for glory. Now I cook for connection, for community, for honoring those we lost by helping those who are still here." Thomas stood, his 70 years not diminishing his presence. "5 years ago, I walked into a kitchen and recognized a legendary chef washing dishes. But it wasn't his talent that impressed me. It was his humility, his willingness to start from zero. That, friends, is true greatness." 7 years after the burnt sauce incident, Daniel was at the cemetery where Lucas was buried. It was the anniversary of his brother's death, but for the first time, Daniel didn't come only with guilt. He came with accomplishments. "Hi, bro," he said, kneeling before the headstone. "I brought someone to meet you." Emma was by his side, holding flowers. "Uncle Lucas, it's me, Emma, the niece you never met. But Dad tells me stories about you all the time, and I feel like I know you." Daniel put his arm around his daughter. "Lucas, I want to tell you about what I built. Lucas's table serves 200 people a day now. Half are people who could never pay for a dignified meal. The program has trained 89 ex-convicts. 77 are employed. 12 opened their own businesses." He gently touched the headstone. "But more important, bro, I found Emma again. And Melissa and we didn't get back together, but we're friends, co-parents, family again, just different." Emma placed the flowers. "Uncle Lucas, I promise to continue the legacy. I'm going to be a chef like Dad and you. I'm going to cook with love. I'm going to serve with dignity. I'm going to make you both proud." Daniel hugged his daughter, tears streaming. "He's already proud, sweetheart. I'm sure of it." One afternoon 10 years after the burnt sauce incident, Daniel received an unexpected visit at Lucas's table. A man of about 45, well-dressed but visibly nervous. "Chef Costa," he said, "my name is Roberto Mendez. I need to talk to you." Daniel invited him to sit. "How can I help?" Roberto took a deep breath, his hands trembling. 10 years ago, I worked at your restaurant. Sava. You fired me for stealing from the register." Daniel's heart stopped. He looked at the man, memories flooding back. "I remember," he said cautiously. "After you fired me," Roberto continued, tears already forming, "I was furious. I thought you had ruined my life. So I started that fire." Daniel froze. This was the man who had killed Lucas, the man who had destroyed his life. "I was arrested," said Roberto, his voice breaking. "Spent 8 years in prison. Got out 2 years ago. And since then, I've been living with unbearable guilt. I killed your brother, destroyed your life. And you were innocent." Roberto was crying openly now. "I came here I don't know why, to apologize, to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I know nothing can undo what I did. But I needed to look you in the eyes and say, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." Daniel felt anger rising, years of pain, loss, injustice wanting to explode. This man had taken Lucas from him, had stolen 4 years of his life, had destroyed his marriage. But then he looked around the restaurant. saw Carlos serving customers with pride, saw Raymond laughing with other regulars, saw Emma in the kitchen, learning a technique with Sarah, who was visiting to help. And he realized, anger wouldn't bring Lucas back. Revenge wouldn't return the lost years. "Roberto," said Daniel, his voice firm but not cruel, "you killed my brother, took 4 years of my life, destroyed my family." Roberto nodded, expecting condemnation. But holding anger doesn't change that. Daniel continued, "So here's what we're going to do. Are you looking for work?" Roberto blinked, confused. "Ah, yes. But nobody hires ex-convicts." "Wrong," said Daniel. "I hire. You're going to work here. You'll wash dishes, clean the kitchen, the most humble work, and you'll participate in my training program." "I don't understand." Roberto was in shock. "Why would you do this?" "Because it's what Lucas would do," said Daniel simply. "My brother believed everyone deserves a second chance. That mistakes don't define us. So I'm going to honor him by giving you what you didn't give me, a chance to start over." Roberto collapsed in sobs. "I don't deserve this." "Nobody deserves grace," said Daniel. "That's why it's called grace. But you're going to earn it. You'll work hard. You'll learn. And one day, you'll pass it forward to someone else who doesn't deserve it, but needs it." Seeing Roberto work was difficult at first. Every time Daniel saw him, he remembered the fire, Lucas, prison. But gradually, something changed. Roberto worked tirelessly, arrived early, left late, never complained. And in training sessions, he showed genuine talent. "Why do you do this?" Carlos asked Daniel one day. "That guy destroyed your life. How can you look at him without anger?" "Because anger is prison," Daniel replied. "I already spent 4 years in physical prison. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in emotional prison. Roberto has to live with what he did. I choose to live despite what he did." Emma found it harder. "Dad, that man killed Uncle Lucas. How can you be kind to him?" "Because your uncle taught me that kindness isn't about what people deserve," said Daniel. "It's about who we choose to be. And I choose to be someone Lucas would recognize, someone he'd be proud to call brother." 12 years after the burnt sauce incident, Emma graduated from culinary school with honors. Daniel was in the audience, crying with pride. After the ceremony, she ran to him. "Dad, guess what? I got a job offer." "Where?" asked Daniel. "Here, at Lucas's table. I want to work with you. I want to continue what you started." Daniel hugged his daughter, his heart overflowing. It would be the greatest honor. Melissa was there too, smiling. She had remarried, a good man who respected Daniel's role in Emma's life. But she and Daniel had maintained genuine friendship. "You did well, Daniel," she said. "Our daughter is extraordinary, just like you." 15 years after that day when Daniel saved the burnt sauce, Lucas's table was celebrating its anniversary with a special dinner. More than 300 people attended, regular customers, program alumni, chefs from across the city, and family. Antoine was there, retired but still passionate about food. Sarah and Marcus, now renowned chefs in their own rights. Victoria, who had transformed her empire into a force for social good. Thomas, now 83 but still mentally sharp. And Roberto, who had completed the training program and now worked as sous chef at Lucas's table. He approached Daniel, visibly nervous. "Chef Costa, Daniel, can I speak?" Everyone fell quiet as Roberto went up to the small improvised stage. 15 years ago, he began, his voice trembling, I committed the worst imaginable act. I took a life, destroyed families, and I spent the last 7 years working for this man, the man whose brother I killed. Tears streamed down his face. He owed me nothing, had every right to hate me, to send me away, to seek revenge. But instead, he gave me a chance, trained me, taught me, treated me with dignity I didn't deserve. Roberto looked directly at Daniel. You saved me. Not just gave me a job. You saved me from the prison of guilt. Showed me redemption is possible. That mistakes, even the worst ones, don't have to be death sentences. He turned to the audience. Lucas Costa was, from what I'm told, an incredible man. And I killed him. I'll never completely forgive myself for that, but I'll honor his memory by living the way Daniel taught me, with grace, compassion, and service. The audience was silent, many with tears in their eyes. Daniel stood and walked to Roberto, embracing him. "Lucas is proud," said Daniel loud enough for everyone to hear, "because you transformed tragedy into purpose, just as I learned to do, just as we all need to learn." Emma joined the embrace, then Sarah, then Marcus. Soon the entire kitchen was on stage, embracing Roberto, fully accepting him as part of the family. Thomas wiped away tears. "In 50 years covering gastronomy, I've never seen anything like this. Daniel, you don't just cook exceptional food. You cook community. You cook redemption." 20 years after the burnt sauce incident, Daniel was 62. Hair completely gray, but eyes still bright with passion. Lucas's table had become an institution in San Francisco. The training program had expanded to 6 states, with over 400 ex-convicts trained and employed. Emma, now 34, had taken over as executive chef of the restaurant. Daniel still cooked, but less. He spent more time mentoring, teaching, sharing stories. On this particular morning, Daniel was at Lucas's grave again. But this time, he brought someone special. "Lucas," he said, "I want to introduce someone. This is Miguel. He's 5 years old, and he's my grandson." The boy looked curiously at the headstone. "Grandpa, who's Lucas?" "He was my brother," said Daniel, kneeling. "Your great uncle. He was a chef, like me, and he was the best man I ever knew." "Did he die?" asked Miguel with the brutal innocence of children. "Yes, dear. A long time ago. But you know what's magical? Every time we cook, he's there. Every time we share food with someone hungry, he's there. Every time we give someone a second chance, he's there." Miguel thought about this. "So he didn't really die?" Daniel smiled through tears. "No, my love. He lives in everything good we do. That's why Grandpa cooks. That's why your mommy cooks. To keep Uncle Lucas alive through kindness." That night, Lucas's table was full as always. Daniel watched from the kitchen, Emma commanding the team with mastery, Carlos training new students, Roberto supervising the cold line with perfect precision. A young man of about 19 was washing dishes. It was his first day. Daniel approached him. "How's it going?" he asked gently. The young man, clearly nervous, replied, "Good, sir. Sorry if I'm slow. Still learning." "No apologies," said Daniel. "You're doing great. By the way, what's your name?" "Marcus, sir. Marcus Silva." Daniel smiled. "Marcus, can I tell you a secret? I started washing dishes too. In this exact place. 20 years ago." Marcus looked surprised. "Really? But I mean, everyone says you're legendary." "Legends are just people who kept trying," said Daniel. "You were in prison, right?" Marcus lowered his eyes. "Yes, sir. 2 years. Drugs. I understand if you want to fire me." "Why would I do that?" Daniel placed his hand on the young man's shoulder. "I was in prison too, for years. And when I got out, someone gave me a chance. Now it's my turn to give you a chance." Marcus had tears in his eyes. "Why? Why care about me?" "Because someone cared about me when I didn't deserve it," said Daniel. "Because my brother believed everyone deserves dignity. And because, Marcus, you're not your mistake. You're what you choose to do after it." Years later, Daniel was in a hospital. At 75, his body was finally giving up. Pancreatic cancer, the doctors said. Maybe 6 months. Emma was by his side, holding his hand. Melissa came, bringing Miguel, now 18, and his sister Sophia, 15. "Dad," said Emma, her voice breaking, "I'm not ready to let you go." Daniel smiled weakly. "Sweetheart, I've already lived 3 lives. The first as a young, selfish chef. The second in prison and penance. The third in purpose and community. 3 lives in 75 years. I have no regrets. But Lucas's table will continue," said Daniel. "With you. With Carlos. With Roberto. With everyone we trained. Because it's not about me. It never was. It's about Lucas. about honoring those we lost by helping those who are still here. Roberto entered, visibly devastated. Daniel, I have no words. Then don't use words, said Daniel. Use actions. Continue the work. Keep giving second chances. Keep cooking with love. Thomas came, now 96, frail but determined to see his friend. Daniel, my boy, you transformed the world. Not the world, said Daniel. Just my little corner of it. But if each of us transforms our corner, eventually the whole world changes. That night, alone in the hospital room, he had sent everyone home. Daniel closed his eyes and saw Lucas. It wasn't memory. It was something more. Hi, bro, said Lucas's apparition, smiling exactly as Daniel remembered. Lucas, Daniel whispered. You're here. I always was, said Lucas. In every dish you created, in every person you helped, in every second chance you gave. Daniel, you took our tragedy and transformed it into beauty. I'm so proud. I tried to honor you, said Daniel, tears streaming. And you succeeded. Lucas approached. But now it's time to rest. You've worked enough. Fought enough. It's time to come home. I'm afraid, Daniel admitted. Don't be. Lucas extended his hand. We'll cook together again, like old times. And we'll watch Emma and the others continue the legacy. Daniel took his brother's hand, and for the first time in 25 years, he felt completely at peace. Daniel Costa's funeral was attended by more than 1,000 people. Chefs from around the world came, customers from Lucas's table. Many who had been homeless when they met him wore their best clothes. Ex-convicts he had trained formed an honor guard. Emma gave the eulogy, her voice strong despite tears. My father wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, suffered tragedies, was unjustly judged, but he chose to transform pain into purpose. Chose to give people the second chances he almost didn't have. She looked at the casket. Dad, you taught me that the true flavor of success isn't in Michelin stars or awards. It's in sharing the table with those who are hungry. It's in seeing dignity restored. It's in transforming ex-convict into chef. Roberto stood, his voice trembling. Daniel Costa gave me what I didn't deserve, forgiveness. And by doing so, he saved me. I devote the rest of my life to passing it forward. Marcus Silva, the young man Daniel had encouraged years ago, now executive chef of his own community restaurant in Oakland, spoke. Chef Costa told me I wasn't my mistake, that I was what I chose to do after. Those words saved my life, and now I teach that to others.